this is because, you know, Jay and I are the dynamic duo, so you can't break up superheroes, can you? And so we wanted to stay together, and we're looking forward to today's presentation. So with that, I think we have a couple of people stuck on the freeway maybe that are coming in late. I don't know, Jay, are we ready to go?
I think so. Yeah, we're basically all in.
Okay, so good morning to everyone. A lot of familiar faces out there. Jay's going to be looking at the chat while I'm speaking, and then I will be monitoring the chat while Jay's speaking. Hey, Jay, is there some reason why Drew can't get in?
I don't know. I guess I'll just say, Drew Gammett, are you here? Yeah, because you were one of the first to come into the waiting room. But yeah, everybody seems to be getting in except you.
Okay.
Maybe if you can chime in via chat that you're here, Drew.
Yeah. Maybe he didn't pay his...
I've had a couple people do that in the past, and it ends up they're there. They just kind of had a weird double profile.
Yeah. Do you think that's a dues issue, Jay?
Probably, yeah. They automatically know who hasn't paid up. So yeah, that probably is exactly it. The special CCAE version of Zoom.
Yeah. Okay. Let me find my, gotta find there we go. Okay, so what I'll be covering today, if everybody's okay and moving forward, I'm going to cover just a little update on the CAEP Summit. I'm going to talk about 3-year plans and goal setting. I'll give you a little glimpse into the preliminary state data that we have right now. I'll talk about our efforts on establishing communities of practice, the interviews that are going on, the research, which will dovetail into transition efforts. And then I know Carolyn later today is going to be covering the K-12 adult WIOA 2 survey data. So I'll cover the non-credit survey data that we just got related to adult education. And then we'll leave it for a few minutes of open discussion, take a break, and then Jay will come on and he'll do his probably a little over an hour, maybe an hour and 10 minutes worth of material, and that will take us up to 11 o'clock. So any questions on that? I think everybody's okay, right? Does that sound like a good agenda? Okay. All right, well, let's get going. Let's see here. Having trouble with my, okay, there we go. So CAEP Summit, over 1,200 people registered. CAEP is still working on the evaluations, but the virtual summit platform will stay open for the next couple of months. So I went in there the other day. I was looking for a couple of presentations that I really enjoyed, and I wanted to download the slides and listen to a few segments of it, and I was able to do that. All you have to do is log in and then go to the platform, click on the auditorium, and then up comes the strands, and you just select the various presentation that you want to hear again, or if you missed it, you could listen to it for the first time. So I'm working with Sacramento County, TAP, on packaging the various strands, and we'll release that probably starting in January. So certain topics, like if we wanted to have more focus on equity, we'll release information on all the different archive versions that we had at the summit, or if we're talking about integrated education and training, or if we're talking about program development or program evaluation. So we'll be packaging these for easy viewing pleasure, and that way you don't have to keep hunting around. And if there's additional resources out there, we'll include those in kind of these little briefing sheets or briefing info bulletins that we'll put in the newsletter, or they might be just individual email notices that'll come out. So look for that in the new year. And then for next year, Summit 2021, it'll also be virtual because we couldn't reserve a hotel given the current situation. nor did we wanted to take the risk of it being canceled again. And we thought the virtual summit went so well and we had so much access that we're going to be virtual again, probably in October next year. And so also just a side note, the CAEP office, the panel that we presented had set the record for the most people on a panel. I think it was over 20 people. We broke Zoom, so we're happy about that. So let's see, moving on to the next slide. Oh, let's see. Okay, so 3-year plans and goal setting. So we're going to be rolling guidance out in the spring of next year. Plans will be due the following year, June 2022. So we're going to try to give you at least a year's notice in advance and provide tools so you can work on your planning and your goal setting. And we will include goal setting. We haven't done that in the past. Some of you might have already done that in previous plans. I know in WIOA 2, you're doing goal setting. So we'll probably align with that process. We don't want to have you doing something completely different than you're already doing. And so the way it'll work is your 3-year plan that you finished maybe a year or two ago, you can update that or you can create a new plan, brand new plan. It's up to you. But the plan is for regional use only. So once it's approved locally by your consortia, all you have to do is upload it to the document box or the 3-year plan box in NOVA. There won't be any review by the state because that's your 3-year plan. What we will be looking at and what we will require you to submit are those goals and targets. And we'll be putting that into NOVA as a separate section, but those goals and targets will be locally driven. There won't be, I mean, we'll look at like the state performance for WIOA 2, and you can look at also if on the college side, you can look at the vision for success goals, and we'll provide a lot of data, labor market data, need data, those kind of things like we did last time. But it's really going to be a locally driven process because we know each region has different types of goals. So what's good for one school, like one school, they might just want to increase their enrollment, where other schools want to increase, outcomes like high school diploma, or they want to increase their transition rate to employment or post-secondary. But various schools are at different levels in adult education. So we're not looking to mandate any kind of performance goals, but we will provide you plenty of information to allow you to set your goals. We're still in discussions as far as, how far do we let that goal setting go? Is it just restricted to the current metrics that we're collecting? Or do we go beyond that? Or can you come up with your own locally driven goal, which might not be a statewide metric that we're collecting? So we're still having some discussion on that. But we wanted to give you a heads up. So it's an interesting topic. We look forward to moving to goal setting. Now, this isn't paper performance or anything like that. We're not ready for that yet. We're still working on our data integrity. We have some problems with displaying the accurate amount of high school diplomas and high school equivalencies. EFLs, we're still working on things like that. But at least we're starting the process of goal setting and getting you comfortable with figuring this out at the local level. So more to come on this. We'll probably do some webinars and some technical assistance. We'll probably bring in some goal setting experts to talk about this, and TAP can walk you through this process if you need help. So let's see if I can move these slides. There we go. Okay, so here's the next slide is the 1920 preliminary state CAEP data. So this preliminary data is just the data out of TOPSPro, which would include all WIOA 2 grantees, that would be colleges and county offices and K-12 adult schools, as well as any CAEP K-12 adult or county office programs. What would be missing from this data is the non-WIOA community college data that's still being processed. And so right now they're processing the enrollment numbers. Next month they'll have the award data. And then in January, we'll be able to run the base wage file job placement numbers with the EDD. And we'll have that in January. And then they'll be processing that through February, and hopefully early March, we'll have the data for launch board for 1920. So far, as we look at the 1920 data in compared to 1819, there's been a 10% drop in enrollment for CAEP. And then if you looked at the WIOA 2 funded colleges, they show a 12% drop. So we are showing a little bit of drop. We knew that from the survey data, and we'll continue to keep you posted on that. From the initial data for 2021, we are seeing big drops in ESL and a little lesser drop in CTE, but those are the two programs that seem to be affected. We're also seeing, at least from the TOPSPro preliminary data, 68.8% of the students are reaching the 12 hours of instruction from the enrollment numbers. So when students enroll, 68.8% of those students are reaching the 12-hour mark of instruction, which gets them into the outcome pool. And then of those students reaching 12 hours or more, 37% are completing one or more educational functioning level. So that's good news, I think, despite the current situation. Let's see. Okay. So moving on to the next slide. Here's something that you might be aware of. You might have been contacted, but it's a new effort we're doing. We're in the process of creating communities of practice. That might have been done locally, but we're doing this on a statewide basis. And part of this process is we have Hanover Research and High Road Alliance interviewing various consortia, various districts, various programs to see, like I said up here, you know, who's doing what, how are they doing it, and if they're any good at doing what they're doing. So what we're doing is identifying emerging practices in areas like guided pathways or IET or immigrant integration or pre-apprenticeship, contextualized instruction, you name it. And we'll be posting kind of briefing documents on this, and then identifying those emerging practices, putting it on the Practices with Promise website, which we'll be revamping, and then identifying local experts by region, and that'll be on the website as well. We're looking at how to encourage people to volunteer to be subject matter experts, maybe a stipend or something. I don't know, we're still going through that. And then having this available to the field. So if you're interested in looking at an IET model in your region, who is that person to contact? So what we found out previously in the last few years, we do these webinars at the state level. We'd bring in experts, nationally recognized experts, and they would talk about these concepts and strategies. But it would be difficult for people at the local level to take those concepts and strategies and implement them locally. So what we're trying to do is get some local experts that people can work with, contact, figure out, or set up some local communities of practice. And then another idea that's emerging with CAEP is creating a CAEP Leadership Institute to, you know, we have about 30% turnover in CAEP leadership as far as at the consortia level. And so we're trying to set up this Leadership Institute, still working on it, but it would be, you know, kind of like other leadership institutes, but this would include, you know, strategies on transition, leadership, you name it, data improvement, data accountability. And so we're kind of thinking through a lot of things like what would the criteria be? How often would we offer it? Would we focus on, certain areas that need help, need more professional development, maybe don't have access to, that kind of, don't have capacity to do the professional development. So we'll see, but it's exciting. We're looking forward to that. And when we think about this, we think about all these different transition efforts. And, AB 705 is pushing the college to transition. And I think the WIOA 2 measures on post-secondary are also pushing for that transition. And here are some of the things we're kind of looking at, focusing on, and they're all kind of interrelated. When you look at dual enrollment, that's SB 554, but that also connects to SB 68, which allows students to transition through AB 540. And that's all related to non-residents or undocumented students. And so that tuition fees was a deterrent, but if we can figure out how to waive non-resident tuition fees, which it appears to do through SB 554, and then if we can figure out how to use our learner mastery to qualify the 420 hours under SB 68, I think that would be a good pathway for our students. So we're kind of looking at this stuff, trying to find out who's doing it, setting up dialogue at the state level to talk about, what does that 420 hours mean in SB 68? And then also looking at co-enrollment. Co-enrollment is WIOA 1, the workforce, the local WIBs, the one-stop centers, the AJCCs, and then co-enrolling with WIOA 2. I think we're on the third phase of pilots. And so we're gathering a bunch of information on that, also including CalFresh, maybe in that co-enrollment discussion. And so we've been gathering a few other consortia to participate in the Fresh Success program, which allows for reimbursement with adult ed funds through CalFresh. So we're trying to look for emerging practices there, getting some webinars done with local experts, as well as IET, which has been around a lot longer than many of these other strategies. And we're doing interviews on that, as well as guided pathways. Hanover Research is going out and looking at guided pathways from if there's anything being done on that in the K-12 adult schools or with non-credit. How does that look compared to the standard guided pathways that credit colleges might be doing or other colleges might be doing nationwide? What is our brand of adult education guided pathways? So we'll have that research probably by the beginning of the year, and we can start teasing, some of that information out, figuring out, what's the landscape in our state and what is it, how does that affect our non-credit and K-12 adult programs. We're also looking at putting some more focus on pre-apprenticeship. I think there might be an RFA targeting adult ed, adult schools, as well as non-credit on pre-apprenticeship. And that might be coming out in the next couple of months. We're also interviewing people about immigrant integration. And I know CASAS is going to be releasing reports that allow you to look at your TOPSPro data in an immigrant integration framework. So we're excited about that. And we'll also have some research on, who's trying to implement immigrant integration. Of course, you have the San Jose allies and their efforts, but we also have pockets around the state, like in Central Valley, in Stockton, down south. So we want to see what they're doing, because everybody might have their own brand of how they're implementing this. So we're excited to see that and share that with everybody. And then we have these interesting pathway mapping efforts. I don't know if anybody listened to the summit presentation on the CTE pathway mapping that West Ed did, but they went around the state and looked at all the course catalogs in every part of the state, all the adult schools, all the non-credit programs, and they mapped out by industry sector what people are offering. So that's the first time anybody's done any supply side research. And then they match it up with the labor market information through the Centers of Excellence. So based on industry, based on region, you can really see what's going on supply side and demand side. And so they'll be rolling out some webinars next year. They've already done one at the summit. I think they're going to do some special reporting for San Diego area, but that'll eventually go statewide probably next year. So we're looking forward to that. And then lastly, the Chancellor's office is looking at competency-based education as a way to qualify students. So we'll see where that goes. They're currently piloting credit, but they might open that up eventually to non-credit. So that falls in with how WIOA 2 is calculating hours and learner mastery. And so all these things are kind of intertwined. And as they roll forward, I think they're all going to be a big bonus for the California Adult Education Program. And so we'll be staying on top of this, keeping you posted. And like the previous slide said, doing some research, identifying emerging practices, as well as local experts, putting that on the website for that Sacramento County maintains, the CAEP website, and then hope to promote these communities of practice eventually. So, and then eventually when that Leadership Institute gets off the ground, all this will be, part of that institute. So even though we're in the middle of a pandemic and enrollment might be teetering a little bit in certain programs, I'm really encouraged with how next year is going to look. If we can get back, to some safe environment and allow students to come back into the classroom, or, the hybrid model, if students are really, thriving in the online environment. I'm not sure about that, but certain segments might be. I think we're seeing high school diploma. There is some strength there, not particularly strong in ESL. Some of those students need in-person instruction. So we'll see how this goes, but we'll be laying this foundation and access to research, as well as experts, as well as emerging practices that you guys can learn from. And maybe you're already there and you can share that with us or with your region through these efforts that we're doing. So, and this is my last slide. So I'll probably take about 10 minutes and then I'll open it up for questions. There might be questions in the chat, and then we'll take a break. But I wanted to share with you the recent survey data. So over 1,000 responses from 80 community college. This is non-credit faculty and staff. It was done, before summer break. Carolyn will have the K-12 adult student survey and the administrator survey. And she'll do that in the afternoon. So what we saw on this non-credit survey is both community college administrators and staff and non-credit faculty identified email and Zoom as the primary mode for communicating with students. Faculty identified text and then phone as the most common communication modes. Some unexpected survey surprises is student enrollment engagement stronger than anticipated. They were able to reach different students as they could better regulate the schedule. Students seem to be more resourceful. The departments provided support in technology use for students. We see students increasing their technology skills. We also saw students engaging family members in classes, which we know is happening on the K-12 side as well. And faculty and staff and teamwork and resilience. Let me just kind of blocked here in the face of the shift to online or distance education. So that was really encouraging. And so we hope this is aligned with what's happening on the K-12 side. I assume it would. And a couple other things. Let's see if I can move to the next slide here. Okay, some challenges that were noted. Of course, difficulty of some students to access or use technology. We knew about that. We also knew that a number of students don't have access to technology. There was a lack of online etiquette, so understanding, kind of the social norms when you go online. And then we knew this through other data, but it just confirms English language learners need in-person classes. There does appear for some students to have some lack of motivation. And then we are seeing a drop in attendance and enrollment in certain programs like ESL and to a lesser extent, CTE. So let's open it up for questions. Let's see if I can find the chat here. Okay, so Jay, where do I start on the chat to answer questions, or have you taken care of most
I've
of
taken a couple. I mean, there's been more comments. There hasn't been, I haven't seen too much in a I haven't seen a super specific question. There's been a few comments.
So you weren't setting
comments from Ryan, a couple comments from Michelle,
Jay,
more comments than questions.
You weren't setting policy while I wasn't looking? Is that what
Not
you're
that I
saying?
can think of, no, maybe accidentally, but not on purpose.
Okay. All right. So let's see. We have Ryan said that we had a drop of 10% of enrollment statewide when only the last 10 weeks of school year shut down. Seems to be a big number, although it's a testament to the way adult students enroll consistently throughout the years. Makes me concerned that this year's drop from 18-19 is going to be big. Well, we'll see. I don't know, Jay, what's your feeling as far as, I mean, you don't have Q1. We still have about 100 schools that haven't reported yet on Q1, but we have a big, significant amount of students that have reported in. What's your feeling? What's Q1 going to look like when we look at the TOPSPro data? What's your feeling?
Well, I mean, I gave Ryan kind of my anecdotal answer is just, I mean, not necessarily from data, but just from discussions at meetings and all that. The low-level ESL is what everybody says has been hit the hardest. They're the ones that were the most likely to fly the coop maybe in March, April when everything was closing down. Those are the ones that a lot of agencies say disappeared and didn't come back. Higher level ESL, I'd say overall more mixed results on that one. Some say they're actually doing well. And high level ESL, others are saying more they're struggling the same. ASE is the one that people anecdotally are saying is the best. A lot of agencies actually are saying they get an increased enrollment in ASE, maybe because people have more time to finish up the diploma, finish up, the GED and so on. So the ASE programs are actually increasing. CTE, probably not as bad as low-level ESL overall, but because, needing to bring people into the facility and use equipment and things like that, a lot of people are struggling there.
Yeah.
That's the 40,000 foot overview anyway.
Right. From the mountaintop, from the CASAS mountaintop. Yeah.
That's right.
So there was a suggestion sent to me directly. It would be great to identify what has changed in emerging career fields due to COVID. And I think that's what WestEd's going to do. They have that labor market information. And so they can put demand side with supply side, and demand side is showing, that shift in retail hospitality, and they can show what other industry sectors are emerging. And then we can compare that to what's being offered in the field through course catalogs. They also have a way of updating that so they can get more current information if you changed your course catalog this fall as compared to spring when they did the research and the survey. So more to come on that, but we're excited about that. And there was a question, is the data from colleges and adult schools combined? So that's about, I would say the TOPSPro data is with the WIOA 2 grantees, which includes colleges, is probably, I don't know, Jay, would you say it's about probably 80% of the adult ed universe, maybe?
Yeah, that sounds about right. I mean, most of it is from that, because most of the bigger non-credit colleges are the same ones that are WIOA 2.
Yeah, so you're only talking about what we get from the Chancellor's office MIS system is probably like 15, 20%. So that would be community colleges, CTE, non-WIOA community colleges. So so if you wanted to think of this as a survey. You know, if we get 80% of the data, that's probably a pretty good trend that you could look at. So if we're down 10%, we don't see that maybe upticking a little bit, but not too much, because that's the majority of the information. And then the college, 12% might go up a little bit when we include the non-WIOA data, but not too much. So I would say that's pretty solid information.
What I'll say also is that both Ryans have questions about the budget.
Oh, both Ryan. So I'm
Yeah,
getting a double Ryan attack here.
that's right. I had to take advantage of that opportunity to say it that way, I guess.
Okay, so R squared, here we go. What is the chatter on the state budget regarding AE for 21-22? So we are doing a full court press. If you're not part of this process, we are working with the News and Review to put together some publications on high-level adult ed in our regions. So like the LA region, the Bay Area, and Sacramento. Those are where key stakeholders reside. And so we'll be presenting that material to them once we get it done. It'll show student success stories. It'll show the need in the region. It'll show how well we're doing, how resilient we are, what we can do in the future to help the economic recovery. And so we are planning to, hold our ground, and hopefully the 21-22 budget will not be a disappointment. So we're doing kind of an all-out effort to promote adult education, but I haven't heard anything where any language being proposed that's going to cut our funding or anything like that. So, but we are in conversation with Department of Finance and the legislature, as far as, and as well as CCAE and ACE. So we're looking forward to a lively discussion and, promoting adult education for 21-22. So nothing yet. And Ryan says we are on track on the 2021 budget. Are the numbers tracking better or worse than anticipated when the budget was signed in June? So Ryan, as far as people spending their money or us getting the money out, I know Department of Education, CDE, said that the allocations for 2021 will be hitting the street in the next few weeks. I guess that got over to state controllers first week of November, and it usually takes them a couple of weeks to get that out to the county offices, and then the county offices put that in the district accounts. So we're hoping that can wrap up later this month. And so we look forward to you guys getting your money if you're a direct funded K-12 or county office program. Let's see. So some students are willing to learn. Some students say their home computers are being used by their children. Definitely. And we know the lack of technology is impactful. And Jay's going to cover the testing. So I'm going to save that question for Jay's presentation. And
what I might just comment on that related to what Alma and Elsa are asking is, the payment points question per se, I can't answer. That's obviously a question for CDE, not me. As far as some of the options for remote testing and what the state and federal policies are now, I'll go over. And then if you look at the CAEP side only, which of course is what Neil and I are presenting this morning, I have some suggestions that I brought up a couple times in the past on ways where you can report student outcomes in different ways that may or may not involve testing. To be exceedingly clear, that has a 0% chance of earning a payment point. It has nothing whatsoever to do with payment points because that's WIOA 2, not CAEP. But on the CAEP side per se, some of the suggestions we'll bring up, will work as other outcomes you can report and still have positive things to show on the CAEP summary and so on.
Okay, and then Todd asks, any data results yet related to wage and employment from adult agency SSN collections as data match with EDD? So there's a couple of different data matching efforts going on. They're always like a year and a half in arrears because of the way the base wage file works. But Jay, so CASAS and the survey, what's the latest on that one on your side of the house?
You mean on the employment and earnings survey?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, short answer is I don't know the percentage off the top of my head, but short answer from Nicole is the first quarter here actually was a good bit better than what we got in the third or fourth quarter. You know, the third and fourth quarter last year, the response rate got a lot lower, I think, for all the COVID related reasons. It seems, I'll just say anecdotally again, that maybe agencies are getting the hang of that now. Everybody now has the memo that we're still doing the survey. Nicole put together some really good help documents that I think made it easier for everybody to follow the directions and so on. So overall, I mean, it's still not good. I mean, are the response rate results good or bad? I'd have to say they're bad, but they do look a lot better this quarter than the last couple of quarters.
Okay. And then Wested will be in January running their version with EDD on the CAEP data file. So we'll see. CASAS and Wested are working together to align that information. So we've got and then on the college side, the Chancellor's office is having a non-credit participate in their CTE survey, which they call students up to see if they've been employed and if they've had an increase in wages. As we know, that's very difficult to do, but we're not paying for it out of CAEP funds. So we'll see what kind of results they get. We know that's a hard sell, cold calling people in adult ed. You know, people don't want to talk to strangers. So we'll see what we can kind of predict how that's going to roll out. But, you know, we'll see what they do. And then maybe we can gain some understanding and improve our practices from that. So, and Jay, I'm not sure if I understand Josie's questions. Is it possible to computer train ESL beginners by fours in our classrooms?
Right, I'm not sure either. I mean, are you talking about distance learning instruction, remote testing, or something else?
Okay.
I guess I'll let Josette respond back on what she means. It
Yeah.
seems like she's talking about instruction, in which case I don't think there's any policy that would say yes or no. So thereby, I would think it's fine, but I'm less than 100% sure too that I'm reading the question right.
And then somebody asked me what percentage of students are sharing their SSNs. I would say
we've bumped up actually on that. We're still low. We've bumped up, I think, to about I want to say we're like 19 or 20% for 1920. We were down at 7 to 10% historically over the last year with a lot of the grandstanding, you know, folks like us have done on it. I think we've moved up, not quite at 20, but close to 20 now. So our percentage is still, I've got to say, very low and probably a lot closer to abysmal than great. But another one where at least we're a lot better than we were a couple years ago.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I was gonna guess at 10%, but that's great. We're
we bumped up.
That. Yeah. All right. So that's good news. All right. Any other questions before we take a quick break and then turn it over to Jay? You don't have to log off. You can, you know. So Josette's talking about to train them how to use the computer so they continue to learn from home.
Yes.
That's probably what, an OTAN question or?
Right. I mean, I'll just say per policy, I don't think there's anything on that. I think you might be thinking, because we at CASAS do have some strict ratio requirements when we're talking about how you set up with working with students for remote testing. I'll just say, as far as I know, there isn't anything strict like that when you're just setting up, you know, digital literacy practice or distance learning instruction. We have strict rules with remote testing because it's a standardized process. There's a lot of issues with security that we necessarily need to adhere to and so on. For the sort of stuff you're talking about, Josette, there aren't really the same strict requirements. So I think you have a lot more flexibility to set it up the way you like.
Okay, and then Kathy added, it probably depends on your district COVID policy
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
So, all right. So I'll stick around to answer any additional questions. If you guys want to take a quick break, maybe get a refill.
Yeah.
I'll
start at
sharing.
9:50 to make it rounded up to 8 minutes instead of 5.
Okay. And then I'll stop sharing, Jay, and then you can share your
Yeah.
your screen. So and then I can continue responding to people in the chat if there's other questions. But I appreciate everybody coming on board today. And I'm excited about Jay's presentation, as always.
You can tell
So-
everybody's just bated breath.
So
Worms
Jay-
are coming out of everybody's mouth. Everybody's waiting with bated breath so much, aren't they?
Okay, Jay, so my picture is about, I want to say 10 to 15 years older than I am now. How old is your picture there?
You mean the one with the nifty little purple shirt?
Yeah.
It's actually from August. It's not old enough.
Ah, geez.
I
You're
updated mine. I had one of those, but I updated it a couple months ago.
You're looking good.
Yeah.
So all right. So Alma says we are doing our enrollment over the phone and we're getting more SSNs than ever. This is unusual to us, but want to share it just in case you want to try. Okay.
Hey, Oma, if you don't have to do this. You're tired of me saying things like this, but if you want to send me a little email blurb with that, I'd appreciate it because I'm kind of collecting those little tidbits. I don't think that's one I've heard before, but it does make a lot of sense. I mean, I'll try to get Mike or whatever to send me the chat so I can get it that way too. But
All right. So feel free to just walk away or focus on something for the next, what are we at, 7 minutes now, Jay?
Yep.
Okay. And then we'll start Jay's. How many slides you got in that package, Jay?
Way too many.
So
I'm not going to cover them all, though. I mean,
they're all resource
I'll hit
slides.
the highlights.
Yeah, but this
It's a
is
pretty big group, though, so it should be okay.
Yeah, for those listening, this Jay's slides are a good resource. And so if there's a way to download them, I would recommend that, or maybe CCAE will share those later, post those on the website. But
Yep.
a lot of good information there. And then while everybody's on, I can remind people, if you're an administrator or coordinator, remember the NOVA program area reports are due December 1st, the actuals. So you'll be going into NOVA and certifying those actuals. What you did in September were an estimate, and now you go back in and you could edit those numbers and then certify them as actuals. Or if they still are good, you could just certify those estimates as actuals now. So, but that is helpful. That's how we do our trend analysis on other fund sources, on cost per hour, all kinds of different stuff. It'll be interesting to see as we track hours of instruction and expenditures by various fund source, how this has changed in the last 6 months. I think we'll try to get Tim Harmon, who has done the analysis for the last 2 years on the program area data, to come back if he can do it again and present that in the spring. And we'll have a 3-year trend there. And kind of give us a idea of maybe what the 4th year, the 2021, or actually, so this data that we're looking at is the 1920 data. And so next year when we do this, this will be for the 2021 data. And so that's where we should see some shifts due to the declining enrollment that we're seeing in ESL and CTE. So we're anticipating hours of instruction to go down there. But let me make sure there's, okay, No chat questions. Okay, so just don't forget about that. I know a lot of people have not submitted their budget and work plans. Q1 is coming up December 1st. So if you're a CAEP member, you will have to submit your expenses for Q1 of 2021 on December 1st. Your consortia will certify that at the end of December. But in order to submit that, you have to have your budget and work plan for 2021 in place. I know most people, I think everyone, except for maybe one consortia I had to remind, they did certify their Q4 for 1920. So we do have all that data in. But we know a lot of people haven't certified their work plan and budget. So you got to get on that, because then you'll get caught up. That was supposed to be done in October. So for those of you who are delaying, please get on top of that so the Q1 can go in. We also notified anybody with outstanding 18-19 funds. Yesterday I sent out emails to a variety of individual districts to say you got to spend that 18-19 money down by next month. I think statewide that was only about $4 million. So compared to the 538 million we started with in, or it was 526 million for 18-19. The fact that we only have 4 million left is encouraging, but you do have to spend that down by the end of December, or else it goes back to the state general fund. So we encourage districts to spend down that money. If they can't, contact their consortia, and the consortia can do an allocation amendment and shift that to other members that can spend that. That way it stays within the consortia and doesn't go back to the state general fund. So we will look at the Q2 report to see if there's zero balance. Anybody with remaining funds as of Q2, they'll get an invoice from the state asking to remit those funds to the state general fund. So keep an eye on that. Hopefully the last few years we've had no funds returned to the state. So we want to keep that track record at 0. And so we encourage people to take a look if you were notified by us yesterday to come up with that spending plan. You might have already, I know a lot of people already responded saying we're on top of it. We're going to spend down, no problem. So that's encouraging. So just a reminder on that as well. So feel free to ask any questions while we're waiting, while we're taking this break. And if you're listening to me, I guess you're not taking a break, but so what are we looking at, Jay? Ready to go?
Yeah, I think we can. Yeah, I think we can here. Hang on.
Okay, I'm just trying to think of anything else I have to remind people about. No, I think things are pretty good. You know, we know about the downturn in enrollment a little bit, but that's expected. I mean, it's not just adult ed, it's across all, you know, higher ed. They're seeing a decrease in enrollment. So we're not standing out. In fact, we're probably doing better than other places because we get our data a lot quicker and we can see what the data looks like, whereas the others have to wait a long time to see the ramifications of the declining enrollment. If you're reporting into CASAS on a monthly basis, we'll be able to check that out a lot quicker than other institutions or other higher ed programs. So keep that in mind. And you have those CAEP summary reports. Jay, quick question. CAEP summary reports are only as good as how often you update your CASAS data, right?
That's correct.
So if you submit monthly, you would be able to pull those monthly report, CAEP summary report, and look at your monthly data, right?
Correct. And I'd say in particular, obviously, that CAEP summary is tracking outcomes and services. So the big things it's dependent on is how frequently are you updating all those outcomes related to get a job or, earn workforce certifications, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. But they're also tracking enrollment and services, right?
Correct.
Okay. That's good for marketing and seeing what your outreach is doing, which programs are recovering. And then you could look at your hours of instruction, how many students are getting past the 1 hour mark, how many students are getting past the 12-hour mark, the persistence rate. So a lot of good information you can use on it on a monthly basis to kind of manage your programs. So, and this is what Jay's going to talk about. So I don't want to steal his thunder.
No, you sure don't.
I'm just promoting. I'm the guy outside with the wagon and
That's right.
the potions and soaps.
Well, you know how thunder deprived I am, so I need all the thunder I can get.
That's right. You're such an introvert.
That's right. I need a lot more thunder than I already have. Yeah. All right. On that note, I think I'll go ahead and thunder into this second presentation. I see a few people trickled out, a few people trickled in. I think we're kind of set with what we have. I'll go ahead and blow this up so you can see the slide a little bit better. Sorry, I got carried away, but I think everybody can see the slides now. I'll just go ahead and pick up here. This is what I have. The agenda, I think, is similar. I want to double back a little bit. It seems like we can't really talk about anything still without giving a little bit of a, hey, here's what's going on with COVID-19. I kind of feel like every time we talk, we've got to at least bring it up. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the updates we have this year. To some extent, when we talk about updates for this year, we're also really bringing back some of those updates from last year. You might remember Neil and I brought a lot of really big updates at the beginning of the 1920 year, talk about thunder, I guess. But because of COVID and because of everything else, I kind of think a lot of those updates kind of got forgotten here over the last 6 months because everybody's obviously been busier with other things and so on. So I have brought it up a couple times, and it does kind of feel like, the reminders are useful. So I want to get into that. I want to hit a little bit of a reset of what the basic programs are for CAEP. And then we'll get into a review of outcomes and services. Some of it is going to be stuff that I know some of you have heard 5, 10, 15, 25 times before, either from Neil or me or both, but we'll go over it. And then in particular, I wanted to cover a few things that we've been talking about a little bit more lately related to COVID. I think it relates a little bit to your questions, Elsa, relates a little bit to your questions, Alma. Here's some ways that you could still get outcomes if you're having trouble with things like remote testing, if you're having trouble maybe recording everything from distance learning instruction, whatever. So some really find it helpful, some maybe not, but just some things you can do, ways you can record some of the outcomes you're seeing in distance learning instruction. And then I also wanted to take a chance to talk about our I3 reports, or Immigrant Integration Indicator reports. That falls in the category of the what's new this year. I don't think that many people have really gotten going on it that much. But now that we've had the summit, we had a couple big presentations on this. I've spoken with some of those agencies that Neil referenced in his presentation. So I know there's some other contractors that are also working on this issue, just like we are. So I really do have the feeling that after some COVID-19 dormancy there for a while, just because everybody had bigger fish to fry, we're sort of getting back to normal a little bit, maybe not in the in-person point of view, but back to normal in the sense that a lot of those big issues like immigrant integration, the employment and earnings survey and use of SSN is another good example. There were things that we kind of put on the shelf for a while because we were too busy talking about distance learning and remote testing and all that. And now we're getting back to normal. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. I don't want to make this a big data dive. We've got a big group, so you'll be glad to hear I deleted all the hardcore data dive slides from this presentation, but I at least want to review the basic reports just so everybody has the frame of reference. I also wanted to bring up, not required, we had some good chat discussion during Neil's presentation without any seed planning, but but I would be interested in these issues if anybody has anything, interesting to share on any of this. I'm interested in any sort of outcomes you might be, recording here this year. Anything, related to, distance learning or anything that you've just been doing overall, any input on some outcomes that have been successful for you. If you have input on maybe some challenges or difficulties you've had, that's great too. And then whether it's COVID-19 related or just in general, I'd also be interested in any outcomes you might have had that have been maybe trouble spots for you. I've been talking about this more whenever I do CAEP presentations lately, because the second bullet was going to be the fictitious, data dive trainings that would have gotten done in the spring of 2020 had we not had COVID-19, is looking at how to apply real world scenarios to TE data and reports like the CAEP summary. What was coming up before COVID is a lot of you started approaching me with, yeah, we think we've got the bubble boy stuff down pat. We know what all the bubbles and check boxes are for. We know how to read the CAEP summary. We're kind of okay on that. But if you apply all that stuff to the real world on what students are doing, that there's still a little bit of a disconnect between all that bubble boy stuff Neil and Jay are talking about and what we're seeing with students in the real world. So whether you want to report scenarios that related to uncertainty or confusion, or maybe you have some scenarios that are working super great for you, either way, I'd really be interested in hearing about that. And then obviously any sort of new activities that have maybe come up during COVID, whether it's offering distance learning, whether it's using educational software, whether it's rearranging your instruction or outcomes to distance learning a little bit more easily. I'd be interested in any shifts you might have. I planted these seeds in other trainings and it's worked pretty well. So I'll just say, if you have any comments on any of this, I'd be super interested in hearing, maybe what you have to say about it. So that said, I'll move along. So it's always the pink elephant. So COVID-19 wise, there's that OTAN COVID-19 website. I know everybody's heard this a million times, so I don't want to dwell on it, but it continues to be the hub of the COVID-19 adult ed universe. And then if you're an insider, you've heard me talk about these federal memos umpteen times as well. That is in the spring when everything kind of hit the fan and everything closed down. The feds responded very quickly with 3 memos in the spring. As I like to say, these memos legalized remote testing. That remote testing was never allowed until we had COVID-19. Before all this hit, we weren't allowed to do any kind of testing unless an in-person proctor is present. And then here's kind of where we are now. The last one came out the end of May. This relates a little bit to those questions about, what are we going to do about payment points or outcomes? So I'll just summarize it. This is from OCTAE. So we've got a mixed group. So just so everybody understands, OCTAE stands for the Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Education. It's the component of the U.S. Department of Education that pertains to us. That is, it's the office that addresses, obviously, career tech ed and adult ed. So these are the feds, these are the ones you might say on high that are offering the guidelines for us. So the most recent one was end of May, and they do allow for self-reported placement, meaning it's no longer required to get everybody pre-tested to enroll students. So they're admitting that it's very difficult for you to get everybody pre-tested as a condition for enrollment. They're waiving that if you need to do something less formal to get them in, or you just want to put them in class without testing them in normal times, that's kind of not okay. But now here under COVID, they're going out of their way to say that's fine. However, they're still in the same memo going out of their way to note a pre-test, post-test is still required to achieve that measurable skills gain. So I'll just apply it to payment points as much as I can. Is at the state level, there have been no extra memos or anything like that for now. The state policy basically is just lining up exactly with what that federal policy is at the end of May. That is, it's fine if you can't get everybody placed or pre-tested right away. But for now, the only thing that really gets the payment point, so to speak, is by a pre-post test gain. I'll also talk a little bit about force majeure, because I think that relates a little bit to those questions that came up when Neil was talking. Is in 1920, we had in these federal memos, they called for that concept called force majeure, which means unable to perform, or in this case, unable to test. So you might remember Yahoos like me talking about that a lot in April, May, where we added that checkbox to TE. And then when everybody submitted their data in July, August, we had to apply those conditions of force majeure to our end of year data to figure out which students might have been unable to test because of COVID-19. So just to make it as clear as possible, force majeure was a big issue in 1920. As far as I know, it applies like not at all for 2021, that those conditions of force majeure applied to the 2019-2020 year. The feds have kind of gone out of their way to refrain from bringing any of that up for 2020-21. A lot of people kind of ask, gee, it would be a good idea to do it again for some of those, hey, we're having trouble testing our students reasons that Alma brought up and Elsa brought up. But I'll just say for now, the feds have not said anything like that for 2021. There are no force majeure conditions, at least for now. And my unsolicited, editorial is they may well come up with something. It does kind of look like COVID's getting worse, not better. But I don't really think they're going to come up with anything at the federal level until we get into the spring. That is, they're not going to throw in the towel on the year here when we've got over half of the year left. They're going to wait till the last minute before they do anything like that. So I would not expect to hear anything related to this until we're into the spring. They're going to hold out and continue to require pre and post testing. They're going to continue to require 12 hours of instruction and all those conditions and enrollment, just like we've always done. So I'll end that soliloquy, but just because people have questions about it, that's where we stand now, at least as far as federal reporting is concerned. I see your thing, So your question, Exa, is a lot like Alma and Elsa's question. For now, the answer is no. The requirements are exactly the same. If we're still in the same situation in April, May, we are now, I could see at the federal level them coming up with some changes in these guidelines, just like they did last spring. But I don't see those changes coming up until we're in 2021. And you might want to ask somebody like Carolyn, who has a lot more authority than I do. But from my perspective at the state level, and it's kind of true in all other states as well, there's a lot of wait and see. And as far as what's going to go on at the federal level before making any rash decisions at the state level. So I'll just say, hopefully that at least makes sense. But Exa, I see where you're going with this, but I see your question in the same category as those questions presented to Neil earlier, that there are no changes now. There might be between now and the end of the year, but none of those changes are going to be done until later. Because if we make the changes now, well, then everybody's just going to give up on a lot of this. It's a guarantee that our data is going to be overwhelmingly lousy. So we're going to continue to have all those same requirements in place. If things get better, then we'll pat on ourselves on the back for keeping the requirements in place, so we still have a chance at good data. If things continue to get worse, well, then when we know that there's not going to be any turning back, well, then the feds might come up with some of those, changes like they did last year with force majeure. For remote testing, yeah, we're doing piloting. I've got a slide on it. I'll talk about it now. Good question, Exa. If you look at our website, you'll probably find that most of those things we have on our website are way more the same as what we've had the past few months than anything different. But what we've really tried to do different is the last month, 6 weeks or so, we've tried to be a lot more open and encouraging about agencies developing their own ideas, based on what we did on the website, but maybe not exactly matching. That's kind of what we found is we have those 4 or 5 options on the website that you've probably seen a bunch of times before. What happens is that at the average agency, I mean, everybody's a little different, but I'll say at the average agency, a lot of agencies have come up with ideas that make sense, that are very similar to what we have on the website, but maybe not exactly the same. So what we've got talked about more and more is look at what we have on the website. Ideally, you just do the remote testing cookie cutter the way we have posted. But maybe if you have something that's similar, but you've got a few wrinkles at your agency that might make it easier for you to implement things at your agency, we're encouraging you to present that to us. If you have a plan in place and you're just unsure whether we like it, we're going to like it or not, I would encourage you to email remotetesting@casas.org. We've been doing a lot of meetings with agencies where you can submit your plan. We'll have some meetings. I'll admit there's been a couple where we didn't really think much of the plan, but mostly we've been, never really approving the plan as is, but working mutually together to get you across the finish line where you might present your plan. Our remote testing team will like some of it, but maybe make some suggested changes to other parts of it. You'll hit the drawing board, we'll meet again, and we'll move forward in a pilot context. You're on the right track with that term, EXA, where we'll work with you to do it that way. That's probably similar to what we have on the website, but not 100% the same. I think the short answer to your question, Alma, is I wouldn't worry about the POPs right now. I mean, we are going to continue to record, data in NRS reports with POPs. I'll just say, based on your question and others, I think you're primarily worried about payment points. Payment points, like CAEP reporting, completely ignore POPs. So I really think the short answer is, given all the trouble with remote testing, I wouldn't worry too much about POPs. If you really are getting in a good space where you're starting to get everybody tested, then you might start bringing that in. But for now, I wouldn't worry about POPs until you're kind of on that skateboard, really going well with remote testing. I wouldn't add that extra layer of difficulty now, quite frankly. And again, because you're worried about payment points, you're wanting to just test everybody you can. So I wouldn't really, I would worry about not over testing, but I'll just say all of those issues with over testing for the most part have not been a big issue with anybody this year for all the obvious reasons you've brought up already. Okay, hopefully your questions, Alma and Exa, hopefully that helps a little bit. Great questions. The more questions, the merrier. Everybody's seen my slides a lot, so the more time I spend on your questions instead of my slides, the better as far as I'm concerned. Thank you, Exa. So here's another slide a lot of you have seen. Just again, COVID-19 review. We're all doing distance learning. That's any learning activity where instructors and students are separated by time, geography, or both. There's all the fine print in those bottom bullets. There's the link to the federal NRS website if you want proof in the pudding on the federal definition. The other thing relating it to NRS, again, this is a good idea for CAEP reporting, not really required for CAEP, but it is required if you're WIOA 2, which I know most of you are. Way longer than COVID, the NRS or feds have had what they call the 50% rule. Not exactly relevant to COVID, but the 10 years prior, pretty much everybody would say, yeah, we might do some distance learning. But prior to COVID, most of the time, it was always really more of a hybrid format, not pure distance learning. So about 10 years ago, the feds noticed that and said, well, okay, we don't want to report all of this. So just to give you a rule of thumb, what the Fed said is if it's more than 50% distance learning, then record those students as distance learning students. If it's less than 50% distance learning, then don't. And so what that means in TE is at the student or class level, there's an option in the special programs field called distance learning that you mark for everybody who's greater than 50%. Okay, here's another slide from the feds, another one that I dare say a lot of you have seen a bunch before. These are the 3 methods of recording hours using distance learning instruction: clock time, teacher verification, learner mastery. Clock time is just what it sounds like. An hour of, distance learning is exactly equal to an hour of regular instruction. There's other ways for more asynchronous distance learning techniques. You might use teacher verification or learner mastery. Okay, here's what we've been talking about on how we typically like using it in California. This is not required. The bottom line is you're allowed to use any of those 3 methods. You're allowed to use any hybrid mix of those methods. As long as it makes sense and you put it in writing, you're allowed to use any of it. But just based on what we usually recommend, when we're looking at distance learning, we have what we call synchronous and asynchronous instruction. Synchronous basically just means it's facilitated. That is, students and instructor are meeting at the same time. So that would be basically like what we're doing now. We're basically receiving instruction through distance learning. We're all on Zoom. We're all separated by geography right now, but we're all talking about it at the same time. That is, we're currently engaged in synchronous instruction. So if we're doing that sort of DL instruction, we would want to use the clock time. Again, an hour of distance learning is exactly equal to an hour of regular instruction. On the other hand, if we're doing it asynchronous, that is, they're doing distance learning and they're doing it at a different time. So that might be educational software, video checkout, maybe it's via Zoom, but they missed the regularly scheduled time. So they're following up with the Zoom recording or something like that. Those would be asynchronous. We recommend learner mastery. In general, we've heard this a lot. We recommend learner mastery, not teacher verification, because we feel like teacher verification puts way too much responsibility on the teacher. If you're having the teacher use that method, that suggests that the teacher is directly observing all the students while they're performing their distance learning tasks. In most situations, that seems a little bit unrealistic. So we suggest learner mastery. That is where you define the instruction, you define the amount of hours to that instruction, and then once the student completes that particular activity, you go ahead and credit them with that hours. Okay, let's see here. Okay, looks like we're fine. Okay, I think that's enough on DL. This is not a DL training, so sorry, back to Kate. Got carried away, but there were some questions on it, so I fleshed it out a little bit. So back to our feature presentation with CAEP programs. Here's what I like to call our 5 basic CAEP programs. This relates a little bit to what we were talking about a lot at the beginning of 1920, a real good example of a hot topic last year that kind of got forgotten for all the obvious reasons is we had 7 CAEP programs for a while. Last year, we talked about how we were at the state level anyway, we were folding it in from 7 to 5. So we had a couple that we folded into career tech ed. So what we say is our primary programs are ABE, ESL, and career tech ed. We also have adults with disabilities. We also have parents supporting students achieve K-12 success. Those are our CAEP programs. Looking at it at another way, here are those 3 kind of primary programs. I'm not sure that's the right word, right? I've done this a few times as well. Yes, I did DL, a big one on DL on Tuesday. Thank you, Neil. Exactly. So here's looking at it another way. where we've got the 3 primary programs. ESL is obviously one of them. ESL is ESL is ESL. That one really doesn't cause any confusion for anybody. ABE, though, causes a little bit of confusion. ABE is the official program for CAEP reporting. Just to be clear, on the CAEP side, ABE is considered one program. That is, ABE and ASE are folded into one program. Some of you might consider that 2 programs. Some of you, if you do WIOA, probably consider it 3 separate programs, because ABE includes ABE. It also includes high school diploma. It also includes HSE, which is basically GED and HiSET. Career Tech Ed is another one that sometimes causes a little bit of confusion. You know, what we did at the beginning of 1920, these are the changes we're talking about, is we have CTE now includes 4 subsets. One is obviously CTE. We have one that we call short-term CTE. We folded in pre-apprenticeship, which used to be a separate program. We also folded in workforce prep, which also used to be a separate program. Again, we looked at doing that in 1920. I'm really just presenting this as a review because so many people, you know, kind of forgot that we did this, again, for all those obvious reasons. Here's a little bit better way of explaining what we've been doing in CTE, just a little bit of reference, not absolute. CTE is obviously a long-term program, and it's occupation specific. It focuses on nursing, it focuses on HVAC, it focuses on welding, etc. Short-term CTE, like CTE, is also focused on a particular occupation, but it's more short-term in nature. Everybody asks, well, how many hours defines, you know, regular CTE versus short-term CTE? Gotta be honest, I'm not sure there is an exact answer for that. The best answer I have is on some of our old slides, we used to use 48 hours. So that's by no means the official answer. But if you need something instead of nothing, some programs use that as a rule of thumb. So I'll give that to you just so you have something instead of nothing. Pre-apprenticeship is also, like CTE, long-term and occupation specific, but obviously applied in a very different way. And then workforce preparation, that's the one that we used to call workforce reentry. That one is short-term in nature, and it's not short-term specific. So if it's really about offering job interview skills or resume skills, or general information about workplace safety or something like that, it's not geared specifically to nursing or specifically to welding or something like that, then that's what we would call workforce preparation. So I'm going to take a breath, sanity check. Everybody hanging in there. That was a very abrupt transition on my part, I admit. Is everybody hanging in there, even though I might have pivoted, a little bit too quickly there? Thank you, Exa. All right, everybody hanging. All right, thank you. All right, we'll move along then. Okay, here's a summary. This was what Neil and I were talking a lot about, there a year ago when we did, all of our trainings. It was, I'm sure everybody remembers it fondly, but we did our last, training right about a year ago in San Bernardino, a day prior to last year's Palm Springs conference. But this is what we was talking about. We had the workforce reentry issue where we changed it from workforce reentry to workforce preparation. We changed that adults served. We'll be having some changes to that TE report here soon, but we'll be looking more at differentiating between the services only students that have 0 hours of instruction versus the students that had 1 to 11 hours of instruction. At the state level, there's more interest in looking at that difference between the students that were here for services only versus those that received some instruction, but maybe didn't quite reach 12. So that's what we mean by the 3 categories up to now. We've really just looked at it. Do they have 12 hours? Yes or no? meaning we've looked at it more from a two-category perspective, you might say. Hours by program in multiple programs. This, I think, is old news, but this has to do with that CAEP hours by program report that you use for NOVA. I'll just say a reminder, old news, but if you've got students enrolled in more than one program, when you go into that CAEP program hours report, by definition, it will always split it 50-50. So the example I've been using for the last year is IET, or implemented integrated education and training, just to give an example that applies to a lot of you. That is, they're co-enrolled in CTE and ESL. So if you've got that marked at the class level, TE will by definition split it 50-50. So if that's the right answer, if that's the way you intended, then you need to do nothing. TE will do all of that organizing for you. If deep down you know 50-50 is the wrong answer, maybe the right answer is they're really more like 70% ESL and 30% career tech ed or something like that, then you need to create the two separate classes and record all the CTE hours in the CTE class, record all the ESL hours in the ESL class. And then the next bullet, I think, is also old news. We're not tracking service hours. That was like so 2019, but you remember in the 18-19 year, that was a big source of confusion. At the start of 1920, Neil clarified that we're not recording those hours anymore. Student barriers to employment, everybody's doing great at that. And then we also talked about the passage of an exam. We have recently had some state level discussions on that. So more to follow on this one. You know, we really are looking at this one more and more. There's a lot of interest at the state and federal level to better integrate what we're doing across all the WIOA title numbers. A real good example of that is that passage of an exam outcome. So last year, you might remember Neil and I talking about there's nothing really formal. That this was the data police gonna get you issue, where we admit, are the data police gonna get you on this one? 99% no, they're not. But what we're saying is when you record those CTE related workforce outcomes of workforce prep or occupational skills gain, have some kind of an exam attached to it. Maybe it's CASAS testing, maybe it's a skills check, maybe it's a informal written exam you prepared at your own agency. Doesn't matter which one you use, but have some kind of an exam that documents that. Okay, we went into a little bit this hours by program. I forgot I had these slides, so I went off on a couple soliloquies, so I won't repeat it. But this is that hours by program. By definition, you know, that report will split the hours across two programs exactly evenly 50-50. Here's the one that talks about service hours, getting a little deeper. It doesn't have to do with delivery format. I think that delivery format issue is real clear to everybody now that we're in COVID, is that even before COVID hit at the state and federal level, there was never an interest of discouraging instruction outside of the regular classroom. Even before COVID, the state and feds were actually quite eager to get more people doing distance learning instruction. If you didn't believe it last year, I know everybody definitely believes that now, where you definitely apply hours, whether it's in the regular classroom or in any other alternative format. But the bottom line is, to have it count as quote unquote hours of instruction, it needs to be hours that are associated with that program. So if you're doing legal counseling or fiscal counseling or something like that, that's marvelous, but that doesn't necessarily relate to ESL or ABE. It's different hours, so it doesn't really count as that instructional hours when you're doing state and federal reporting. Okay, moving along. This was the passage of an exam. I don't think I need to repeat that one. I don't see any questions, so I'll move on here. And so I'll move on to the next section here, just because I've been babbling a lot on all this other stuff anyway. So anyway, this is an oldie but goodie. This is looking at the framework for federal reporting on the left. For federal reporting, what the feds call performance indicators. We also have what the feds call MSGs, or measurable skill gains. So this is just showing when we set up the CAEP structure there 4 or 5 years ago, we weren't just sitting there in the ivory tower making it all up. We related exactly to what the feds already had in place. So you can see we have a couple performance indicators. We have 5 measurable skills gains. If you look over there, we've got those AB 104 outcomes at the state level that defines what we're required to report for CAEP reporting. I'll just say, not so coincidentally, those 6 areas of AB 104 that dictate what we report for CAEP are suspiciously familiar to what the feds already have for their performance indicators and measurable skills gains. Here's a slide that everybody's seen more than 10 or 20 times, I guess. Once again, the 6 areas of AB 104 and the specific outcomes that fall under these 6 categories. Here's the specific outcomes that fall under literacy gains. A lot of you might be getting tired of this. I dwell on this one a little bit more on the others because the specific outcomes in this category tend to be the ones that generate the most questions, that cause the most confusion, and so on. So again, when we talk literacy gains, mostly we're talking about pre and post testing. That's by far the most common one, but it doesn't all mean that. I'll back up a step here just to explain, because we've got a good mixed audience here that maybe hasn't heard this a lot. But in the early presentations, when we talked a little bit about trying to go backwards here, I guess. Sorry, let's see. Okay, there, I have to click to undo it. So going back to this slide, sorry, it's demoralizing when I go backwards, but I want to look at this and say, when we look at that measurable skill gains concept, the difference between performance indicators and measurable skill gains at the federal level is the indicators are what you might call the tangible outcomes. That is things like get a job, get a pay raise, enter college. That is an outcome you can sink your teeth into, get your diploma. Either the student got it or they didn't get it. So everybody agrees, get a job, earn your GED. These are all great outcomes, but what the feds realized quickly is if you rely solely on performance indicators, you're guaranteed to leave most of your students out in the cold, because most students are going to take a while to get a job or complete the diploma or whatever. So we started working on that concept called measurable skill gains, where we have ways to record outcomes for students who maybe still need more time before they get that job or finish up that diploma. So move into pre and post testing. That was obviously what we carved out for students in ABE and ESL as a way to show, hey, they haven't finished their diploma, they haven't transitioned to college, but hey, they've still done a bang up job on their CASAS testing. So we still have a way to document and verify the fact that the student's doing a really great job. So for ABE, ESL, we have the built-in way to show positive performance for ABE and ESL. In CAEP, though, we've got these other programs like CTE and workforce prep. So we need some alternatives. So one example of that is Carnegie units. That's the alternative for high school diploma, where you can report measurable skill gains based on gains via credits instead of gains via CASAS testing. We also developed that occupational skills gain and workforce prep milestone that I just mentioned. That's what we carved out for career tech ed sort of students. So we've got ways to show progress in career tech ed. We've got ways to show progress in high school diploma. We've got ways to show progress in ABE, ESL through pre-post. So again, I've been going over another ginormous mouthful. So I think I'm going to pause here a minute. Everybody hanging in there, probably a good time to pause and sanity check. I think I lost everybody. Okay, there we go. Late returns coming in here. How about that for a good November 2020 term? Late returns, but we're getting in. Okay,
Okay.
so here's a couple of these alternatives. This is for high school credits. So here's the screenshot where you can mark it in TE. Long story short is there is a way to mark credits in TE, but every district manages credits a little bit differently. So we have you use that self-reported level field in TE. You're basically marking ASE low enrollment and then ASE high sometime later. What you're documenting officially by doing this is you're reporting students who are in high school diploma and start the year at the 9th or 10th grade level or ASE low and finish the year at 11th or 12th grade level or ASE high. That's how we're recording a way to document gains through high school credits. Here are those CTE related outcomes. Again, this is another one that we've repeated many times. One is called occupational skills gain. The other is called workforce prep milestone. They're both ways to record progress for CTE and workforce prep students. Everybody's always asked, what the heck is the difference here? So there's nothing, again, this is another kind of data police are going to get you, or more specifically, data police are probably not going to get you. But if you want a consistent way to report it, if you ask me, occupational skills gain represents accomplishment of a portion of a long-term program, whereas workforce prep milestone suggests full completion of something shorter in nature. So the example for occupational skills gain is a welding student. They've completed module 1. They've done a great job. They complete that skills check, a written test at the end of module 1. So they're ready to move forward and start module 2. That's an example where you could record occupational skills gain. The example for the other one is the student enrolls in a 15-hour course on job search strategies. The student finishes all 15 hours. Congratulations. They're still alive at the end of the class. They have some sort of informal documentation that they get for completing that class. So that's an example where you could mark workforce prep milestone. So again, it doesn't have to be exactly that, but those are just an example. Those are just a couple examples so you can kind of get them straight. Hopefully that helps. The other question that came up, I added this one in that because this one actually came up Tuesday and I didn't have the slide, is okay, that defines the difference between those two CTE measurable skill gains. So when do we mark that versus when do we mark these other issues related to, workforce, certification and so on. So over to the left, these top 3 bullets are the ones that I would say fall under post-secondary. That is, they're kind of higher level outcomes than the ones I just defined. Those 2 below are the ones that I would say fall under, literacy gains and are just MSGs. So again, looking in the lower right, you get a literacy gain for partial completion of a longer term program or for full completion of a shorter term program. It quote unquote rises to the level of post-secondary when the student achieves full completion of a longer term program. So back to that same welding example, if they're just completing module 1, that's an occupational skills gain. If once they complete module 5 of 5 and they're ready to move out of career tech ed completely, that's when it rises to the level of post-secondary. That's when you might mark something like occupational licensure or occupational certificate to say they didn't merely make a gain, they earned that certificate that now certifies them to be a welder in the state of California. They achieve that higher level outcome. Okay, I'll move on. I'm getting warned. These next couple slides are just the bubble. Here's the bubbles you can mark for occupational skills gain. Here's the one you can mark for workforce prep outcome. Again, I'm not covering all these. I'm just covering the ones that people ask about. Transition is another one. We have transition to ASE, transition to CTE, transition to college. So ASE is under the hood, nothing you need to mark. You can mark those 3 things if the student transitions to CTE, those 2 at the bottom for college. And then this is what I focus more on. If they start in K-12, adult ed, non-credit, ABE, ASE, ESL, and they finish in K-12 or community college CTE, that's what we mean by transition to CTE. If they start in either one of those places and they end up in 4 credit community college, again, it's got to be 4 credit, that would be a transition to college. Okay, so here's a little bit on COVID-19. So I'm just applying some of those CAEP outcome concepts to some things you might do in the era of COVID-19. So this relates to a couple of those questions that came up in between Neil's session and mine. So, here's a way, again, everybody's moving to distance learning. That is, some of the things related to pre and post testing. Obviously, it's not just pre and post testing. Some of these CTE related outcomes have also been, causing some agencies trouble. So these are just suggestions. You don't have to do this. These are just suggestions of things you might want to consider, knowing that we're in the era of COVID-19 and you're having trouble marking outcomes. So one thing we've been talking about are some of these different informal exams that have come up. Sometimes it's CTE, sometimes it's, things for IET type programs. Sometimes it's using educational software. Sometimes it's built into DL instruction, but you might use some of the informal exams that have come up to measure distance learning. You could use that as CAEP outcomes as well. Some have been more like skills demonstrations that we've started doing for workforce prep and CTE activities. So the first one relates to just class assignments overall. So it can mean a million different things. So I'm just going to give a few examples that will hopefully at least allow you to make sense of it. So by learner mastery, I'm tying it to that learner mastery method of recording hours for distance learning instruction, where again, learner mastery suggests that you're defining what they're doing, whether it's video checkout, educational software, participating in Zoom meetings, whatever. That is, you're defining what that distance learning instruction is, and then saying once the student completes it, we'll go ahead and give the student those instructional hours. An optional feature is, and some of you are doing this, where you might give a student a little quiz at the end of that software activity, or at the end of the Zoom session or whatever, or maybe the Zoom recording or whatever. You might say, gee, well, let's give a short little exam and make sure they can answer these questions, so we can really be sure that the student really and truly completed those software activities or videos or whatever before we give them the hours. That's a good way to show that they passed an informal exam. Thereby, it's also a good way to maybe give some of these informal literacy gains related to workforce prep milestone. Another example is in that educational software. I think we've got a few vendors here, but a lot of the stronger ones have built-in activities in the software. I'll say that because I'm pretty sure the vendors I have are the higher end products that have this built into their material, where they have built in little quizzes that the student passes. So they'll build in that quiz. So before they move out of module 2 and into module 3, there'll be a short little quiz that the student has to pass before they do that. You could use those activities as another little way to show, workforce prep milestone. I know a lot of you do that already, in your distance learning instruction already. So if you do that, that's another good way to record it. The other side are what I'll call skills demonstrations. What I really meant by that in May, June was COAPs. I don't know if you really need to do that now because we have those I3 outcomes. I'm going to make sure I present that. So I'm going to move out of this and into that here in a minute. But we've got those I3 outcomes. That's another good way now. If you pass the COAPs, especially in those areas of workforce prep, that's another really good way to document those outcomes. Some of you have prerequisites where, hey, to get into IET from ESL, you have some things they need to do before they move on. Some of you have some of those skills checks or little exams you require students to pass before they qualify for some of your CTE programs. You know, again, you don't have to do this, but just saying, those are some activities that a lot of you are already doing that you could probably use as good ways to record more workforce prep milestones and so on. That is ways to record more outcomes. Some of you have ways to transition to higher level placement, whether it's in career tech ed, maybe it's moving into higher level of ASE or high school diploma instruction. Those are good ways, again, to squeeze out more possible outcomes. Another example is some of you are working with EL co-enrollment. That is, you've got ESL students who are cross-enrolled in WIOA Title II and WIOA Title I at the same time. A lot of you have little prerequisites the student has to get through before they're going to qualify for those Title I services. Again, another good way to document more informal outcomes and show that your students are achieving positive outcomes, even though we're in COVID-19. I'll get into that in a minute here, Exa. So here's some troubleshooting examples. I haven't seen a lot of these. I think I'm going to move on from this. I'm going to do some more workshops, though, I think into January on this topic. This was a training I did in September about this, and I got lots of good examples here. I haven't seen a lot of questions on this, so I'm going to leave this alone for now and move on to the rest of what I have because I'm running out of time. But this relates to that little chat seating I did at the beginning where I was interested in what are some real world examples that are giving you a lot of headaches. I haven't seen much of that here, but these are some examples that I got in that other workshop, some workforce prep scenarios. What about things that are occupation generic but are in CTE? Whether, if we require OSHA or CPR for a workforce training course, COAP examples, IT examples. I'll move on here, but I think you get the gist on some of the things you can report. Okay, here are some of the Bubble Boy slides. This is just showing, what bubbles relate to CAEP reporting. Here's the same information, but it's a screenshot in TE instead of using the update record. So we have color-coded bubbles and letter-colored check boxes to help you figure out what to mark in TE whenever students achieve these outcomes. Also, a little bit on services. We've got those 3 categories of services: supportive training and transition. Supportive services are the ones that are really working on helping the students with their individual issues, transportation, childcare, legal issues, fiscal issues, etc. Training and transition services apply more to the student's actual instruction. Transition are the ones that more specifically apply to transition to the workforce or transition to college. And then here's some slides that relate some specific examples. These are some specific things we've seen a lot now that we've been in COVID-19. Financial services, services that assist with software, healthcare, obviously, upgrades to work remotely, job seeking skills for those that are out of work. These are just examples that have been on that list of services all along that might be good things for you to mark here in the era of COVID-19. If you want, these are the same exact examples, but giving you checkbox titles rather than real world examples. So if it's easier for you to know what boxes to check than know what scenarios to apply it to, here's the same information in a different way. And then here's just some examples of those different kinds of services. So here's that remote testing page. We talked about that already, but here are our basic examples on the website. Lots of YouTube videos, PowerPoint documents, etc. Reading level indicator, or RLI. That was a little bit more popular, I'd say, in August and September than it is now, because it's for placement. But if you're still having issues with placement, that is, you're looking for that informal placement. You know, in the absence of a pre-test, you might use this CASAS RLI. No proctor is required. You can administer it on the cell phone. It's not an official pre-test or post-test, but it is a lot easier to administer remotely than a pre-test or a post-test. Here's the slide on RLI. It uses the same technical functionality as that employment and earnings survey. You send it to the student via email or via text. Once the student receives it, they can complete it on the cell phone. Once they finish it, they click that final click and they submit it right back into your TE database. You can access the results from the TE test lister as shown on this screenshot. I wanted to get into this immigrant integration here. I saw some questions. These are the I-3 reports. So making a really long story short, it responds to AB 2098. Another good example is something that probably kind of got forgotten in the era of COVID-19 for a while, but it seems like it's coming back. But it's legislation that came out toward the end of 2018. That is at the state level. It requires the state to basically have metrics for immigrant integration. And then at the agency and consortium level, it's optional. You may report these metrics, right? I-3 is similar to COAPs. But what we've done now is once 2098 was passed, there was a committee to look at this. How do we report this in adult ed? The committee came up with a few ideas, but one of the biggies, you might say, is they agreed with what we've said at CASAS for a while. We would say, we've already been doing immigrant integration for many, many years, and it's called EL Civics. So basically that committee agreed. So what we have been doing is relating our EL Civics COAPs to those 8 areas of immigrant integration. So number 1, we have a new column on the CAEP summary called I-3 outcomes that suggests whenever students pass those COAPs, it counts as an I-3 outcome. And we also have some additional reports in TE that relate that. So here's what I wanted to get to. Here's a screenshot of those reports. So this is kind of an agency level summary. We also have class level and student level reports that are a lot like those CASAS competency reports, where it will give you a basic instructional statement. It will give you data at the agency, class, and individual levels. So you can apply this based on the frequency in which your students pass these COAPs to agency, class, and individual level proficiency on these different areas. So at the end of the day, you can measure your students and you can measure your overall program in terms of those immigrant integration indicators. You know, we looked at those 8 categories. I don't think we have all COAPs in there, but the overwhelming majority of our EL Civics COAPs definitely related to one of these immigrant integration areas. So again, we're calling it I-3, immigrant integration indicators. So you can use the instruction, you can use it from an instructional point of view to facilitate EL Civics instruction, or quite frankly, to facilitate any instruction related to, immigrant integration. Okay, and then here's the column on the CAEP summary. From our point of view, it wasn't exactly pre and post testing, but it's not exactly like those other CAEP outcomes either. So we gave it its own column. You can see it appears as column F on the CAEP summary. Okay, home stretch here. CAEP Dictionary, we've got this on the CASAS website. What I'll just say, not ready yet, but I'll make a little plug. We're looking at revamping our CAEP webpage on the CASAS website. Right now, it's just all that pricing info. That the pricing info is still current, but having it be all about that is outdated. So we're going to have a new page here soon that will be more CAEP related, sort of like we already have for WIOA 2. Quarterly data submission wizard. We're calling this an area of success for both CAEP and WIOA 2 reporting. For the very first time, we used that TE quarterly data submission wizard for that first quarter reporting that was due on or before October 31st. So you can do your CAEP data, your CAEP DIR, your WIOA 2 data, and your WIOA 2 NRS DIR all in one fell swoop using that wizard. So you just go through the wizard and bam, you're done. Overall, we're declaring victory. From our point of view, this worked really, really well the first time there for October 31 submission. Here's the calendar, all the due dates, nothing new there. Here's that CAEP summary. Again, it continues to be 3 reports in 1, pre-post testing to the left, most of your outcomes in the middle, services only to the right. CAEP DIR, again, it gives you the 27 items, item count and percentage for all those items. It's a good way to kind of see how well you're doing. I won't get into this craziness on this slide, but I continue to say, be careful with that summary information at the top. That's where the report is reconciling all of your students who qualify for CAEP reporting, weeding out some of those that don't. So we have a consistent denominator across all 27 items on the CAEP DIR. We've been talking about ways to use your DIR for CAEP reporting in the area of COVID. So there are some items that we admit might be a little bit different with COVID: hours of instruction, pre-post test pairs, HSEs and diplomas. These are examples of things that we admit might be more problematic now that we're in the era of COVID-19. There's other items, all of those demographics items, gender, race and ethnicity, date of birth, primary, secondary goals, barriers to employment. These are obviously issues that really shouldn't be any different, COVID-19 or no COVID-19. These should be nice and intact. There really shouldn't be too many issues with these, either way. CAEP Consortium Manager reports, I think here, CCAE South, I've got to say, I think I'm pretty sure I'm preaching to the choir with this one, but I know most of you in the consortium I'm talking to here have already got this, but if you don't, obviously I'd suggest you do. But you can also access some of these CAEP reports at the consortium manager level. It doesn't allow you to look at student level data, but it will allow you to get kind of an overview of how well all of your agencies are doing across your individual consortium. And then, it gives you the CAEP summary. It gives you barriers to employment, and it also gives you that demographic summary. It gives you the option to aggregate multiple agencies, meaning you can get one view where it adds up all the agency data into one nice, neat, and tidy report, or you can uncheck that box and get separate pages for each agency in your consortium. Okay, and then here's where I was going to wean off a little bit here and stay out of these. I thought I kind of changed this a little bit, but I guess I did it. But here's where I was going to give this an end. I'm here with 3 minutes to spare, so I'm going to go ahead and move back to the title slide and kind of check for questions here. I'll just say, I know, Neil, you've been dutifully adding a lot here. Any questions I need to answer?
Not that I can see, Jay. They're mesmerized.
Okay, including you.
That's
okay,
right.
Except you've added a lot of input here in chat, so thanks for that. I think anybody that needed to follow along got more than enough to sink their teeth into from you here, so thank you. So
Jay, Letitia was wondering, as a newbie, where should she start? I didn't know if she was a teacher, coordinator, administrator, but from the CASAS standpoint, if you're new to adult education, where would she?
Okay, Leticia, so I see your thing, Micah. We'll wrap it up after this one. But Leticia, are you primarily worried about CAEP reporting? Or are you more worried about WIOA 2 for federal reporting, or both? I'm not seeing an answer. So I'll just say for WIOA 2, we've got a bunch of stuff on the schedule for November, December. So I would suggest sign up for WIOA 2 for new users. If you're interested in CAEP, I think what I'll use this for, because there was a lot of interest here, is I'll work with Neil and I'll work with CAEP to schedule another CAEP accountability for January, because we'll probably get a lot of newbies then. So I don't think we have anything with CAEP right now, but I'll just say, look at the CAEP calendar, and I will use this as a springboard where early next year I will, work with Neil and Veronica, and we can schedule another one of these for the CAEP side in January. We haven't done one in a couple months, so we can do to that. So also, Leticia, send me an email because I am the quote unquote CASAS rep for a lot anyway of Southern California, and I'll get you on my list. I do send periodic emails to a lot of Southern California participants. I've got my regional network meetings. There's one for inland counties here coming up next Tuesday morning at 9. There's one for the greater LA region coming up this Thursday morning at 10. So you might also want to consider coming into one of those regional network meetings. And that's where you can work with other practitioners here in your Southern California region. Okie doke.
You're golden, Jay.
Okay, and I'm getting a little elbow in the ribs here from the conference organizers suggesting that we ought to wrap it up here by 11 so people can give them a break. So if nobody has anything, I think we'll do exactly that.
Sounds good.
I ain't seeing nothing.
That's right.
Going once. Going twice. All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you.
Okay,
Good to be back in the saddle. That was the first time. That was the first tag team, I think, since that, when we did at CCAE Palm Springs, because for different reasons, we've been sort of detached the last several trainings.
Yeah, this would be, if they made a movie, it would be Jay and Neil Rides Again.
There we go. There we go. With apologies to Weekend at Bernie's parts 2, 3, and 4 there, right?
Yep. All right. Well,
that's right. If you want the version where you don't have a dead person clunking around into all these tables and airplane chairs and stuff like that, right?
All right, Jay.
All right. Take it easy, man.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Micah, if you're still around.
Yes.